The sun had barely risen over Naval Special Warfare Center in Coronado, California, when Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell stepped onto the training grounds for the first time. At 32 years old, she had spent the last decade serving in Navy intelligence, and now she stood at the threshold of something she had dreamed about since childhood. The Navy had finally opened SEAL training to women, and Sarah was determined to prove she belonged. She could feel every eye on her as she joined the line of trainees. There were whispers, barely concealed laughs, and nudges between the men around her. Sarah kept her chin up and her eyes forward. She had expected this. What she hadn't expected was how quickly the mockery would begin. "Look what we got here," a voice called out from behind her. Sarah didn't turn around. "They're really scraping the bottom of the barrel now, aren't they?" The speaker was a large man named Derek Hastings, a former college football player who seemed to take personal offense at her presence. He had made his feelings clear from the moment she arrived, telling anyone who would listen that women had no business in SEAL training. "Maybe she thinks this is like one of those fitness classes at the gym," another trainee added, sparking a round of laughter. Sarah clenched her jaw but remained silent. She had learned long ago that words meant nothing. Only actions mattered. She would show them what she was made of. The first instructor to address them was Master Chief Dan Reeves, a weathered veteran with 30 years of service and a reputation for breaking even the toughest candidates. He walked slowly down the line, studying each face with an intensity that made grown men nervous. When he reached Sarah, he stopped. His eyes narrowed as he looked her up and down. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he shook his head slightly and moved on. Sarah felt her stomach sink. Even the instructors doubted her. "Listen up," Master Chief Reeves barked, his voice carrying across the training ground. "I don't care who you are or where you came from. I don't care about your college degrees or your daddy's connections. The only thing that matters here is whether you can complete the training. Most of you won't make it past the first week, and that's fine. We only want the best." The physical training began immediately. They ran 5 miles before breakfast, then moved straight into calisthenics. Push-ups, pull-ups, sit-ups, and flutter kicks until their muscles screamed. Sarah kept pace with the middle of the pack, pushing through the pain. She noticed Hastings watching her, waiting for her to fail. During the lunch break, Sarah sat alone, eating quickly and quietly. She could hear the conversations around her, and many of them were about her. "Give her 3 days," someone said. "She'll be crying and calling her mommy." "I give her 2, another replied. "Wait until we hit the cold water." Sarah took a deep breath and kept eating. She had faced doubt before. Growing up as a Navy brat, moving from base to base, she had always been the outsider. But there was something different about this doubt, something more personal. These men didn't just think she couldn't do it. They didn't want her to do it. The afternoon brought the obstacle course, a brutal series of walls, ropes, and barriers designed to test strength, agility, and determination. Sarah watched as the men ahead of her tackled each obstacle with varying degrees of success. When her turn came, she approached the first wall with steady confidence. She jumped, grabbed the top, and pulled herself up and over. The rope climb was harder, her hands burning as she hauled herself up hand over hand. But she made it. One by one, she cleared each obstacle, finishing in the middle of the pack once again. Not the fastest, but far from the slowest. Master Chief Reeves watched from the sidelines, his expression unreadable. When Sarah crossed the finish line, breathing hard but still standing, he made a note on his clipboard but said nothing. That evening, as the trainees returned to their barracks, exhausted and sore, Sarah overheard Hastings talking to a group of men near the showers. "Did you see her on that rope climb?" he said with a laugh. "She was shaking like a leaf. She won't last the week. This is embarrassing for everyone. They're turning this program into a joke just to be politically correct." Sarah stood in the doorway, her fists clenched at her sides. Part of her wanted to march over there and tell him exactly what she thought, but she knew that's what he wanted. He wanted her to lose her temper, to give him a reason to say she couldn't handle the pressure. Instead, she walked to her bunk, pulled out a photo from her bag, and stared at it for a long moment. The photo showed a young man in his Navy dress uniform, smiling proudly at the camera. Her father. He had been a SEAL, one of the best, before his life was cut short during a mission when Sarah was just 10 years old. She had carried his memory with her every day since then. Every challenge she faced, every obstacle she overcame, she did it thinking of him. And now, here in this place where he had once trained, she would honor his legacy by refusing to quit. As she lay down to sleep that first night, her body aching and her mind racing, Sarah made herself a promise. No matter what they said, no matter how hard they tried to break her, she would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her fail. The days blurred together in a haze of pain, exhaustion, and relentless testing. Sarah woke each morning at 4:30, her muscles screaming from the previous day's torture, only to face more of the same. The physical demands were exactly what she had expected. What she hadn't fully prepared for was the psychological warfare. Hastings had appointed himself as her personal tormentor. During runs, he would pace beside her, making comments just loud enough for her to hear, but quiet enough that the instructors couldn't catch him. "You're slowing down, Mitchell," he would say. "Maybe you should fall back with the quitters." During meal times, he would sit with a group of like-minded trainees and make jokes about women in combat, always speaking loudly enough for Sarah to hear. She noticed that not all the men joined in. A few seemed uncomfortable with Hastings' behavior, but none of them spoke up to defend her either. By the end of the first week, 5 trainees had quit. None of them were Sarah. She had survived the cold water training, where they were submerged in near-freezing ocean water for extended periods. She had survived the midnight runs and the endless hours of physical training. She was still here, still fighting. But the instructors didn't seem impressed. Master Chief Reeves barely acknowledged her existence. When he gave feedback to other trainees, praising their improvement or correcting their form, he would simply walk past Sarah as if she were invisible. The message was clear. She wasn't worth his time because she wouldn't last anyway. The second week brought Hell Week preparations. This was the infamous period that broke most SEAL candidates, 5.5 days of continuous training with a total of only 4 hours of sleep. Sarah knew this would be her greatest test. The night before Hell Week began, Sarah sat outside the barracks, looking up at the stars. Her body was a map of bruises, and her hands were raw from rope burns. She was exhausted in a way she had never experienced before. "Mitchell." She turned to find Master Chief Reeves standing behind her. Her heart jumped. He never spoke to her directly unless it was to give a command. "Yes, Master Chief." He studied her for a long moment, his weathered face unreadable in the darkness. "Why are you here?" The question caught her off guard. "To become a SEAL, Master Chief." "Wrong answer," he said flatly. "Lots of people want to become SEALs. Why are you here?" Sarah hesitated. She thought about giving him the standard answer about serving her country or proving women could do it. But something in his tone made her think he wanted the truth. "My father was a SEAL," she said quietly. "He died on a mission when I was 10. I've spent my whole life trying to understand what made him willing to sacrifice everything. I need to walk this path to know who he really was." Reeves was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "Hell Week starts in 6 hours. Get some rest, Mitchell. You're going to need it." He walked away, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts. She couldn't tell if their conversation had been a good thing or a bad thing. But for the first time since arriving, she felt like someone had actually seen her as a person rather than a symbol or a problem to be solved. Hell Week began with a bang. Literally. Instructors set off explosions and fired blank rounds to simulate combat conditions while the trainees were forced into the frigid ocean. The cold was shocking, stealing the breath from Sarah's lungs. Around her, men were already shaking violently, their teeth chattering so hard she could hear them over the waves. "Mitchell looks like she's going to cry," she heard Hastings shout over the chaos. "Maybe we should get her a blanket and some hot chocolate." Sarah ignored him, focusing on controlling her breathing and keeping her body moving. The key to surviving cold water was to stay active, to keep the blood flowing. She had studied this, prepared for it. She would not be the first to quit. Hours later, covered in sand and shivering uncontrollably, the trainees were ordered to complete an obstacle course. Sarah's fingers were so numb she could barely grip the ropes. Her legs felt like they belonged to someone else. But she kept moving, one obstacle at a time. On the third day of Hell Week, something changed. They were doing boat drills, carrying heavy inflatable boats on their heads as they ran down the beach. Sarah was in a boat crew with 6 men, including Hastings. The boat felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, pressing down on her head and shoulders with crushing force. "You're not pulling your weight, Mitchell," Hastings growled. "We're going to lose because of you." Sarah gritted her teeth and pushed harder, lifting with everything she had. But Hastings was right about one thing. Their boat crew was falling behind. The instructors noticed. "Boat crew 2, you're last again," an instructor shouted. "Everyone in the surf zone, now." They dropped the boat and ran into the ocean, diving into the cold water as punishment for their poor performance. As Sarah lay in the surf, waves crashing over her, she heard Hastings speaking to the other men in their crew. "This is her fault," he said. "We're never going to win anything with dead weight on our team." When they emerged from the water, Sarah pulled Hastings aside. "I'm keeping up with everyone else," she said, her voice steady despite her shivering. "If you spent less energy trying to sabotage me and more energy on the actual training, maybe we'd do better." Hastings stepped closer, towering over her. "You don't belong here, Mitchell. You're going to get people killed in the real world. Do everyone a favor and quit now." "No," Sarah said simply. His face reddened with anger. "What did you say to me?" "I said no. I'm not quitting. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. So you can either learn to work with me, or you can keep dragging this whole boat crew down with your attitude." For a moment, she thought he might actually hit her. But then an instructor shouted for them to get back to their boat, and the moment passed. That night, as Sarah lay on the ground during one of their brief rest periods, she felt herself slipping toward unconsciousness. Her body was shutting down from exhaustion. She knew that if she fell asleep now, she might not wake up in time for the next drill. She forced her eyes open and stared up at the night sky, thinking about her father. Somewhere in this same training ground, 30 years ago, he had endured this same hell. He had survived it. She would too. But as the 4th day dawned, and the training intensified even further, Sarah began to wonder if willpower alone would be enough. Hell Week claimed more victims. By the 4th day, only half the original trainees remained. Sarah was still there, moving like a ghost through the endless cycle of cold water, sand, and physical torment. Her mind had entered a strange state where nothing seemed quite real anymore. During a brief medical check, a corpsman looked at her hands with concern. They were torn and bleeding, the skin rubbed raw in several places. "These need treatment," he said. "They're fine," Sarah replied automatically. The corpsman shook his head. "Mitchell, I'm going to wrap them. If they get infected, you'll be medically dropped whether you want to quit or not." As he bandaged her hands, Sarah noticed Master Chief Reeves watching from across the training area. He was speaking with another instructor, occasionally glancing in her direction. She couldn't hear what they were saying, but their expressions were serious. The final day of Hell Week brought a strange mixture of relief and new challenges. The trainees who remained were beyond exhaustion, operating on pure determination and muscle memory. Sarah felt like she was watching herself from outside her body, observing as her limbs continued to move despite having no energy left. They were doing log drills, massive telephone poles that teams of men had to lift and carry. Sarah's team struggled under the weight. Her arms trembled violently, threatening to give out completely. "Come on, Mitchell," one of her teammates gasped. "Almost there." To her surprise, it wasn't said mockingly. The man, a trainee named James Ortega, had barely spoken to her before. Now he was actually encouraging her. They made it through the drill, dropping the log at the finish line and collapsing beside it. Sarah lay on the ground, gasping for air, aware that Hell Week was nearly over. She had done it. She had actually survived. When the instructors finally called an end to Hell Week, Sarah felt nothing. No joy, no relief, just a bone-deep exhaustion that made even standing seem impossible. Around her, men were crying, hugging each other, celebrating their survival. She simply sat on the ground, staring at nothing. Master Chief Reeves appeared in front of her. "On your feet, Mitchell." She struggled to stand, swaying slightly. Reeves studied her with those intense eyes that seemed to see right through her. "You made it through Hell Week," he said. "That's more than I expected." Sarah wanted to feel proud of this backhanded compliment, but she was too tired to feel anything. "Thank you, Master Chief." "Your hands," he said, nodding toward her bandaged palms. "How bad are they?" "They're fine, Master Chief." "Let me see them." Sarah hesitated, then unwrapped the bandages. Her palms were a mess of torn skin and blisters. Reeves frowned but didn't comment on the damage. "You're tougher than you look, Mitchell," he said, "but toughness alone won't make you a SEAL." He paused, his expression unreadable. "Report to my office tomorrow morning at 0800. Sarah's heart sank. Being called to the Master Chief's office was rarely a good sign. She nodded. "Yes, Master Chief." That night, finally allowed to sleep in an actual bed, Sarah lay awake despite her exhaustion. What did Reeves want? Was he going to tell her she was being dropped from the program? Had she done something wrong? She thought about her father again. Somewhere in her belongings was a small wooden box containing his Navy SEAL trident pin, the symbol he had earned through this same brutal training. She had carried it with her from base to base throughout her childhood, a tangible connection to the father she barely remembered. The next morning, Sarah stood outside Master Chief Reeves' office, her stomach tight with anxiety. When he called her in, she entered to find him sitting behind his desk, studying a file. He gestured for her to sit. "Mitchell, I've been reviewing your record," he began. "Your performance in Navy intelligence was exemplary, multiple commendations. You could have continued advancing in that field. Why throw it all away for this?" Sarah chose her words carefully. "I don't see it as throwing anything away, Master Chief. I see it as fulfilling a purpose." Reeves leaned back in his chair. "Your father, Lieutenant Commander Robert Mitchell, Team 5. I served with him." Sarah's breath caught. "You knew my father?" "I was a junior operator when he was a senior enlisted. Later, when I became an officer, I looked up his service record. He was one of the best." Reeves' expression softened slightly, the first real emotion Sarah had seen from him. "He died saving 3 teammates during an extraction gone wrong. Did you know that?" "I knew he died during a mission," Sarah said quietly. "Nobody ever told me the details. They said I was too young." Reeves opened a drawer and pulled out an old photograph. He slid it across the desk. It showed a group of SEALs in their combat gear, squinting in bright sunlight. A younger Reeves stood in the back row, and there, in the front, was her father. Sarah recognized him immediately from the few photos her mother had kept. "He talked about you," Reeves said. "Before missions, when we were waiting, he'd tell stories about his daughter, how smart you were, how determined. He said you were going to be something special." Tears stung Sarah's eyes, but she blinked them back. "Why are you telling me this now?" Reeves was quiet for a long moment. "Because I need you to understand something, Mitchell. When you first arrived here, I doubted you. I thought you were here for the wrong reasons, trying to make a political point or prove something to the world. I was wrong." He stood and walked around the desk, leaning against it as he looked down at her. "Your father's trident pin. You have it with you here." Sarah nodded, confused. "In my bunk." "I want you to bring it to training tomorrow. Wear it during drills." "Master Chief, we're not allowed to wear any personal." "I'm giving you permission," he interrupted. "Your father earned that pin the hard way, same as every SEAL. The men in this training need to understand who you are and where you come from. They need to see that you're not here to make a point. You're here because it's in your blood." Sarah felt a lump form in her throat. Some of them still won't care. "You're right, some of them won't. Hastings and his friends have made up their minds about you, and nothing will change that. But others are watching. Others are starting to see what I see, that you belong here." He paused. "This won't make things easier for you, Mitchell. If anything, it might make them harder. Some will accuse you of trading on your father's reputation." "Let them," Sarah said, finding her voice. "He's the reason I'm here. I'm not ashamed of that." Reeves nodded approvingly. "Good, dismissed." As Sarah left his office, her mind was racing. For the first time since arriving at training, she felt a glimmer of something she hadn't felt before: hope. Not hope that things would get easier, but hope that maybe, just maybe, she had an ally. The next morning, Sarah pinned her father's trident to her uniform. It was tarnished with age, the gold worn in places from years of being carried and handled. But to Sarah, it was the most beautiful thing she owned. When she joined the other trainees for morning formation, the pin caught the early light. She saw heads turn, noticed the whispers starting. Hastings was the first to say something. "What's that, Mitchell? You steal that from your daddy." Sarah met his eyes steadily. "My father was Lieutenant Commander Robert Mitchell, Team 5. He earned this pin 30 years ago. He died in combat saving his teammates." The words hung in the air. Several trainees looked uncomfortable. Even Hastings seemed taken aback, though he quickly recovered. "So you think you deserve special treatment because of your daddy?" he sneered. Before Sarah could respond, Master Chief Reeves stepped forward. "That pin was earned through blood, sweat, and sacrifice, Hastings. Show some respect." The morning training began, but Sarah could feel the shift in energy around her. Some of the trainees looked at her differently now. Not all of them. Hastings and his close friends still glared with obvious resentment, but others seemed to be reconsidering their assumptions. During a water drill, Ortega swam up beside her. "My uncle served with a Mitchell on Team 5, he said between breaths. "He told me your dad was a legend." Sarah didn't know what to say, so she just nodded and kept swimming. The revelation of her father's service changed something fundamental in the training dynamic. She was no longer just the woman who didn't belong. She was the daughter of a fallen SEAL, fighting to honor her father's legacy. It didn't stop the mockery entirely, but it did give her a foundation of respect from some of the trainees who had previously dismissed her. But as Sarah would soon learn, respect from some would only make others more determined to see her fail. The revelation about Sarah's father created a division among the remaining trainees. Some, like Ortega and a few others, began to treat her with grudging respect. They included her in conversations, worked with her more cooperatively during team drills, and stopped tolerating the more vicious comments from Hastings' group. But Hastings himself seemed to take the revelation as a personal insult. If anything, his hostility intensified. "So you think you're special because your daddy was a SEAL?" He confronted her one evening after a particularly brutal day of training. "You think that pin gives you the right to be here? You're disrespecting his memory by pretending you can fill his shoes." Sarah refused to take the bait. "I'm not pretending anything. I'm earning my place, same as everyone else." "No, you're not," Hastings shot back. "You're getting special treatment. Everyone sees it. Reeves goes easy on you because of who your father was." That accusation stung because part of Sarah worried it might be true. Was Reeves judging her by the same standards as everyone else, or was he giving her more leeway because of her father? She pushed the doubt aside. She had to trust that she was making it this far on her own merit. The training continued to escalate. They moved into more advanced combat scenarios, learning small unit tactics and weapons handling. This was where Sarah excelled. Her years in Navy intelligence had given her a strategic mindset that served her well in planning exercises. She could read a battlefield, anticipate enemy movements, and coordinate team actions with clarity. During one exercise, her boat crew was tasked with planning and executing a mock raid on an enemy position. Sarah volunteered to lead the planning session. Hastings immediately objected. "We should have someone with combat experience leading this." "Mitchell has combat tactical training from her intelligence work," Ortega pointed out. "Let's hear what she has to say." Sarah laid out a detailed plan, identifying the enemy's weak points and suggesting a two-pronged approach that would minimize their exposure while maximizing surprise. The other members of her crew listened, asked questions, and gradually came to agree with her strategy. When they executed the plan, it worked flawlessly. Their boat crew completed the exercise faster and with fewer casualties than any other team. Even the instructors seemed impressed. "Outstanding work, boat crew 2," the lead instructor announced. That was textbook execution. Mitchell, that was your plan. Yes, sir. The team executed it perfectly. Master Chief Reeves observed from the sidelines, nodding slightly. For the first time, Sarah allowed herself to feel a small sense of pride. She had proven she could contribute something valuable beyond just physical endurance. But success bred resentment. That night, as Sarah prepared for sleep, she overheard Hastings talking to his friends in the barracks. She probably had help with that plan. There's no way she came up with that on her own. Come on, man, another voice said, one of the more neutral trainees. Give her some credit, that was solid tactical work. You're all being fooled, Hastings insisted. This whole thing is a setup. They're going to push her through no matter what, just to make a political statement. Our standards are being lowered for her. Sarah clenched her fists. She wanted to march over there and confront him, but she knew it would only make things worse. Instead, she lay back on her bunk and stared at the ceiling, trying to calm her racing thoughts. The next phase of training brought combat diving, one of the most dangerous aspects of SEAL preparation. They would be working underwater in zero visibility, navigating by compass and feel alone. One mistake could mean drowning. During the classroom portion, Sarah paid careful attention to every detail. She knew this would be one of her biggest challenges. Unlike running or physical obstacles, this required a different kind of courage, the willingness to trust your training when every instinct was screaming at you to surface. The first open water dive was terrifying. The cold water enveloped her like a dark blanket, cutting off all light and sound. Sarah followed her compass bearing, counting her kicks, trying to stay calm as her air supply slowly depleted. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear it echoing in her mask. She surfaced exactly where she was supposed to, gasping for air. She had done it. Over the next several dives, Sarah's confidence grew. She learned to trust her equipment and her training. She learned to manage the fear that came with being underwater in complete darkness. But during one particularly challenging dive, something went wrong. Sarah was practicing underwater navigation when she felt a sudden tug on her airline. She reached back to check it and realized the hose had somehow gotten tangled. Her air flow was restricted. Panic flared in her chest. Every instinct told her to surface immediately, but her training kicked in. She forced herself to remain calm, to think clearly. She carefully untangled the line, working by feel in the darkness. It took seconds that felt like hours. Finally, the line came free and air flowed properly again. When she surfaced, an instructor was waiting. What happened down there, Mitchell? You were off course. Airline got tangled, sir. I fixed it and corrected my position. The instructor made a note on his clipboard. How much air did you use while you were fixing it? Sarah checked her gauge. More than I should have, sir. Why didn't you surface immediately? I assessed the situation and determined I had enough air to fix the problem, sir. Surfacing would have meant failing the exercise. The instructor studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Good judgment call, but in a real mission, stay on your timeline. Your team needs to know they can count on you to hit your marks. That evening, Master Chief Reeves pulled Sarah aside after training. I heard about your dive today, the tangled airline. Yes, Master Chief, I handled it. I know you did, but Mitchell, I need you to understand something. In this line of work, there's a fine line between courage and recklessness. You stayed down to complete the exercise, which shows determination. But if that had been a real mission, your teammates would have needed to know immediately that you were in trouble. Pride can't get in the way of communication. Sarah felt her cheeks burn. I understand, Master Chief. It won't happen again. See that it doesn't. He paused, his expression softening slightly. But for what it's worth, your father would have done the same thing when he was in training. He always pushed himself harder than anyone else. Just make sure you're learning from the experience. As the weeks progressed, the training moved into weapons qualifications and more advanced combat scenarios. Sarah discovered she was an excellent marksman, consistently scoring in the top tier during range practice. Years of discipline and focus served her well behind a rifle. Hastings couldn't resist commenting. Shooting targets is easy. Let's see how you do when they're shooting back. I guess we'll find out, Sarah replied calmly. The final phase of training before graduation would be a multi-day field exercise combining everything they had learned. It would be the ultimate test of their skills, endurance, and ability to work as a team under pressure. The night before the exercise began, Sarah sat outside the barracks, cleaning her rifle and checking her gear. Ortega sat down beside her. "You ready for this?" he asked. "As ready as I'll ever be." "You know you're going to make it, right? You've proven yourself 100 times over." Sarah looked at him in surprise. "You really think so?" "Mitchell, half the guys who started with us have quit. You're still here. You've survived everything they've thrown at you. Some of us talked, and we agree you've earned your place." He paused. "Hastings and his friends still don't see it, but they're in the minority now." "Thank you, Ortega. That means a lot." "Just watch your back out there during the exercise. Hastings has been saying things, making it sound like he might try to make you look bad during the field work." Sarah nodded. She had suspected as much. "I'll be careful." As Ortega walked away, Sarah looked down at her father's trident pin, which she now wore every day. She thought about all the challenges that had brought her to this moment. The mockery, the doubt, the pain, the fear. She had survived it all. But the final test was yet to come, and Sarah had a feeling that Hastings wasn't done trying to break her. The final field exercise began before dawn. The remaining trainees were divided into 2 teams and inserted into a remote training area designed to simulate enemy territory. Their mission: navigate through hostile terrain, gather intelligence on enemy positions, and execute a coordinated strike on a high-value target. Sarah found herself on Blue Team with Ortega, Hastings, and 4 other trainees. Despite her concerns about Hastings, she was determined to focus on the mission. This was what she had trained for, the opportunity to prove she could perform under pressure in a combat scenario. Master Chief Reeves and the other instructors would be observing and evaluating every decision, every action. This exercise would largely determine who graduated and who didn't. The first day involved a grueling 15-mile movement to their observation point. They traveled in silence, communicating only through hand signals. Sarah carried her share of the team equipment, the weight digging into her shoulders. Around her, the other men moved like shadows through the dense forest. When they finally reached their position overlooking the mock enemy compound, they established a surveillance rotation. Sarah took the first watch, carefully documenting enemy movements and positions. Her training in intelligence work proved invaluable here. She knew exactly what information was relevant and how to organize her observations. After several hours, Ortega relieved her. Sarah was pulling out an energy bar when Hastings crawled over to her position. "We need to talk," he said quietly. Sarah looked at him warily. "About what?" "About tomorrow's assault. I don't think you should be part of the entry team." "That's not your call to make. The team leader hasn't assigned positions yet." "Use your head, Mitchell. You'll be a liability. You're not as strong as the rest of us, and if something goes wrong, we'll have to protect you instead of focusing on the mission." Sarah kept her voice level. "I've completed every training exercise at the same standard as everyone else. I've earned the right to be part of this team." "This isn't about rights," Hastings hissed. "This is about lives. In a real mission, your weakness could get people killed." "Then I guess it's a good thing this isn't a real mission," Sarah replied coolly. "Because I'm doing my job whether you like it or not." Hastings' jaw clenched, but before he could respond, their team leader, a trainee named Rodriguez, crawled over. "Keep it down, both of you. We're supposed to be in stealth mode." That evening, as darkness fell, Rodriguez gathered the team to plan their assault. He assigned positions based on each person's strengths. Sarah was designated as part of the entry team, along with Ortega and Hastings. They would breach the compound while the others provided cover and security. Hastings immediately objected. "Rodriguez, we should reconsider the entry team composition." "My decision is final," Rodriguez said firmly. "Mitchell has proven she can handle close quarters work. She's earned her spot." As they prepared their gear, Sarah could feel Hastings' resentment radiating toward her. She pushed it aside and focused on the mission ahead. She had studied the compound layout, memorized the entry points, and rehearsed her movements mentally dozens of times. The assault began at 0300 hours. Moving in complete darkness, Blue Team crept toward the compound perimeter. Sarah's heart pounded, but her hands were steady. This was the moment everything had been building toward. They breached the outer fence silently, moving in a tight formation toward the main building. Sarah took her position on the left side of the entry team, weapon raised, every sense heightened. The explosion of blank rounds and simulation grenades shattered the silence as they breached the door. Sarah moved through the structure exactly as trained, clearing rooms with mechanical precision. She worked in perfect coordination with Ortega, covering angles and communicating with hand signals. Then something went wrong. As they entered a corridor, Sarah glimpsed movement to her right, a simulated enemy combatant emerging from a side room. She swung her weapon around, but Hastings was suddenly in her way, blocking her line of fire. "Contact right," she shouted, but Hastings seemed to freeze, his large frame preventing her from engaging the target. The enemy killed Hastings with a simulated shot, and Sarah was forced to push past him to eliminate the threat. "Move, Hastings," she yelled, finally getting a clear shot and neutralizing the target. But the damage was done. Hastings was now dead, according to the exercise rules, which would reflect poorly on the entire team's performance. As the rest of the assault concluded successfully, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that Hastings had blocked her shot deliberately. After the exercise ended and they were back at base for debriefing, Master Chief Reeves reviewed their performance. "Overall, Blue Team executed well. You hit your objectives and neutralized the targets. However, we lost one team member during the breach." He looked directly at Hastings. "What happened in that corridor?" Hastings didn't hesitate. Mitchell hesitated when she saw the enemy combatant. By the time she reacted, it was too late. Her slowness got me killed. Sarah's blood ran cold. He was lying, trying to use his own failure to sabotage her. "That's not true, Master Chief," she said, keeping her voice calm. "The enemy appeared on my side, but Hastings moved into my line of fire. I called out the contact and tried to engage, but I couldn't shoot through him." "That's not how I saw it," Hastings insisted. Master Chief Reeves held up a hand for silence. "Fortunately, we don't have to rely on conflicting accounts. The entire exercise was recorded with multiple camera angles." He pulled up a tablet and played the footage. "Let's see what actually happened." The video clearly showed Sarah tracking toward the enemy combatant while Hastings stepped directly into her line of fire. The audio picked up her warning call and her attempt to maneuver around him. It was obvious to anyone watching that Hastings had interfered, either through incompetence or malice. The room fell silent. Hastings' face turned red. Reeves set down the tablet and looked at Hastings with barely controlled anger. "Step outside, Hastings, now." After Hastings left, Reeves addressed the rest of Blue Team. Mitchell's performance during that breach was textbook. She identified the threat, communicated it to her team, and neutralized it despite obstruction. She saved lives. That's what SEALs do. Ortega spoke up. "Master Chief, we all saw what Mitchell did out there. She earned her place on this team." Several other trainees nodded in agreement. Even Rodriguez, who had been neutral toward Sarah throughout training, added, "She's solid, Master Chief. One of our best operators." Sarah felt a wave of emotion wash over her, but she maintained her composure. This was what she had worked for, not just to be tolerated, but to be recognized as a valuable team member. Reeves dismissed them, but asked Sarah to stay behind. When they were alone, he said, "Hastings is being dropped from the program, not just for what happened in the field, but for lying about it during debriefing. That shows a lack of integrity that we cannot tolerate in a SEAL." Sarah nodded, feeling a complex mixture of emotions. Part of her was relieved that Hastings would no longer be tormenting her, but another part felt sad that he had thrown away his own chance because of his prejudice. "Mitchell, I owe you an apology," Reeves continued. When you first arrived, I doubted you. I let my assumptions cloud my judgment. You've proven beyond any doubt that you belong here. Thank you, Master Chief. Your father would be proud of you. Hell, I'm proud of you. He extended his hand, and Sarah shook it firmly. One more week of training and then graduation. Stay focused. You've come too far to stumble now. The final week passed in a blur. Without Hastings' constant hostility, the atmosphere among the remaining trainees improved. Sarah found herself actually enjoying the camaraderie, the shared sense of accomplishment among those who had survived the crucible of SEAL training. On graduation day, Sarah stood in formation wearing her dress uniform. Pinned to her chest was her father's trident, polished to a bright shine. In a few moments, she would receive her own trident, newly earned through months of blood, sweat, and determination. Master Chief Reeves called each graduate forward individually. When it was Sarah's turn, she marched to the front with her head high. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell, Reeves announced, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd of instructors, graduates, and guests. Throughout this training, you have demonstrated the courage, determination, and integrity that define a Navy SEAL. You have honored your father's legacy and carved your own path forward. He pinned the gleaming trident to her uniform beside her father's. Welcome to the Brotherhood, Mitchell. Sarah saluted sharply. Thank you, Master Chief. As she returned to formation, she caught sight of her mother in the audience, tears streaming down her face. Next to her mother stood several older men in Navy dress uniforms, members of her father's old SEAL team, come to witness his daughter's graduation. After the ceremony, those men approached her. One of them, a weathered veteran with kind eyes, introduced himself as Commander James Rutledge. I served with your father, he said. He was my swim buddy during training and my teammate for 5 years. We were there when he died. His voice grew thick with emotion. He saved my life that day, Sarah. He died getting me out of that firefight. Sarah's throat tightened. I didn't know. Your father talked about you constantly. He said he was doing the work so you could grow up safe, so you could be anything you wanted to be. Ruddle smiled through his tears. He would be so damn proud of you right now. You didn't just follow in his footsteps, you blazed your own trail. The other veterans nodded in agreement, each offering their own words of respect and admiration. Sarah realized that she had finally found the understanding she had been seeking. Her father hadn't been a distant hero or an impossible standard to live up to. He had been a man who served with honor, who loved his daughter, and who made the ultimate sacrifice for his teammates. And now, Sarah had proven that she was worthy of carrying on his legacy, not because of who her father was, but because of who she had become through her own courage and determination. Later that evening, Sarah stood alone at the beach where she had endured so much of her training. The sun was setting over the Pacific, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold. She touched the 2 trident pins on her chest, her father's and her own. I made it, Dad, she whispered. I understand now. She understood that being a SEAL wasn't about being the biggest or the strongest. It was about courage, integrity, and an unwavering commitment to the team. It was about pushing past pain and doubt to accomplish the mission. It was about earning the respect of your brothers and sisters through your actions, not your words. They had called her a joke when she first arrived at SEAL Bootcamp. They had mocked her, underestimated her, and tried to break her spirit. But her father's legacy, revealed through the tattoo-like permanence of his trident pin, had helped her find the strength to persevere. And now, Sarah Mitchell stood as proof that courage, determination, and honor knew no gender. She had earned her place among the warriors, not through privilege or politics, but through sheer force of will and the legacy of excellence that ran through her veins. The bloodline of a Navy SEAL wasn't about DNA. It was about the values passed down through generations of warriors who refused to quit, who put their team above themselves, and who understood that true strength came from the heart. Sarah had that bloodline. She had proven it. And now she was ready to write the next chapter of her story, not as someone's daughter, but as a Navy SEAL in her own right. As she walked away from the beach, heading toward whatever challenges awaited her, Sarah smiled. The journey had been brutal, but it had forged her into exactly who she was meant to be.